Hello, everybody. I am wearing shoes because generally I'm walking around in my flip-flops, but I dressed up specially for you. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you've been enjoying the conference thus far. Many of you probably decided to check out what I'm talking about based on what the topic said, and the topic, of course, I believe said, exploring the technology of mind, consciousness, and our DNA reality codes. Well, I know a couple of people happened to run into me and ask me, well, what are you going to be talking about? And I know that seemed a little bizarre because I had to think about it, and that's not unusual for me. A lot of times, I don't quite remember what the topic is. I gave it a while back, and I never know what's going to show up when I decide to come and speak. So anyway, what I'd also like to start out saying is that the beauty in being alive and being part of this human experience is something that really does need to be embraced. In all of its madness and joy and everything, there is something profound about being able to be here in what I like to call this human game. And some people go, well, why do you call it a game? This is serious. Well, it is the human game. We are experiencers. Ultimately, that's what we do. Regardless of the experience that we're having, this is why we are here. And that is the job that we carry out, is the mission of experiencing all the possibilities, all of the potentials of what it could be to be a human being. Good, bad, and indifferent, it all counts. So when we have a challenge and we say that this shouldn't happen or it shouldn't be allowed to happen, and then at the same time, because we contradict ourselves a lot, at the same time we go, all that exists are possibilities, right? Well, if all that exists are possibilities, then those possibilities have to be acted on. And so we find that there's a variety of experiences that occur with human beings in this life, in this reality. You might not be having that particular experience. I might not be. But I think everybody, if they're going to be honest with themselves, they can look at that and realize that this must be a core part of why we are here, is to experience. That is the only way that that which is can experience all of the possibilities that have been imagined, all of the possibilities that exist in the ocean of potentials. And that's all that we're doing, is experiencing that. Now, one of the things that I like to focus on is the fact that we, at this stage, growing up is the word I'm going to use. We have to grow up. And what do I mean by that? I think it's great. We get excited about, our brothers, our UFOs, extraterrestrials, all of that. But I think at some point we have to come to a stage where we go, okay, we know that they're there because we're here. We're aliens too. Right? We don't think of it that way, but we are. We're on some rock, or what we call a planet, out in the middle of what we define as space. So, we are life form out here just as well. So when I say it's time to grow up, I mean that we have to take this journey and this desire to understand way beyond just the fascination and the admiration and the fear and the, what other word can I use? The exalting of those that are outside of our planet. Because what separates us is technology. That's what separates us, is technology. How do we then move into that kind of space? How do we then move up to have what I called a seat at the table. If we keep ourselves in a subservient state, that's not where my mind exists. I don't operate from a state of subservience to anything, and you shouldn't either. Again, all that separates us is technology. Now, we have to redefine this idea of technology, because when we say technology, we automatically simply get locked into devices, the idea of devices, or even if we're talking about our alien brothers, we're talking about the technology of their ship. Well, guess what? All of creation is technology. That is advanced technology. I don't live in the up in the air without insulting anybody, just what we define as spiritual concepts. In growing up, we have to move into a space that goes beyond those kinds of thinking, that level of thinking. We have to graduate. If we don't graduate in our thinking, then we will continue to feel subservient to anything that is outside of our zone of reference or outside of what we define as our planet. We will continue to not recognize the very thing that is the most, I'm going to say probably the most significant thing that we tend to ignore, we tend to be distracted from because of the programming that we have. And what is that thing? The technology of the human body. Somebody asked me earlier, how does your talk relate to, they said little gray men. And, and it relates in a bigger way. It relates in the sense of the desire to transcend much of these, what we look at again as advanced alien beings. We are equal to them. What we're dealing with is memory, a loss of memory. A loss of memory because we had to be here in this space to do this thing called being a human being. So therefore, where I'm coming from is transcending, moving into a more evolved space of thinking, of being. And when I mentioned the human body before, we've been programmed to toss the human body aside, that we don't really need it. And so, yes, I do talk a lot about the birth to death program because it's very relevant. I don't know that we will not have enough time to dive into the magnitude of this. But the human body is important because it is the interface, the interface, the vehicle, the technology that has been designed to allow us to be networked into the simulation. It's a sensory system. We don't see that, though. What do we see? We look at everything else. We look at just how spiritual we can be. We look at, how, what the commonalities are with group mind thinking. We've got this whole other idea about consciousness. Everything that keeps us on a kindergarten level. Keeps us on a kindergarten level. And so, and I have notes here, and this is exactly what I told myself. Sonia, do not do that. Look at your notes. But she doesn't listen. So she runs away, and then I'm like all over the place. But anyway, this was fascinating to me from the moment that I showed up here on this planet. The human body was fascinating to me as a child. Why? Because I wondered why people died, and I thought it was the most bizarre thing that people died. That holds a huge key. Why? When people even talk about their abduction experiences, all of these experiences, what do they usually talk about? It always goes back to the body, either implants that they're talking about, or different things, or probing, because many of these beings are fascinated by the technology of your body, which you are completely oblivious to, because all of the information is kind of right here. It's hidden in this technology. And that's what I started to discover. It's hidden in this technology, but since we've been programmed to run around outside of ourselves, we don't see it, because what do we say? Oh, well, you know, the body is temporary, you know, but we're just going to be spiritual and the body is temporary. No. The evolution that is needed in terms of stepping up to that kind of level of technology that I'm talking about does require the unlocking of this vehicle. And it is not unlocked. It is very locked. And so what we have is, we have what I call anyway, a default system. We're all networked into a default program. A default program in the simulation that determines the direction and the expansion of human life according to so many cycles. Why? Because that which is in these vehicles is not the prominent mind that is operating. The body has its own unique intelligence, and so that intelligence, that mind, is operating in a space that is necessary for survival and for keeping the vehicle, this engineered vehicle, this technology, alive. And because of that, it has what? It has a defined lifespan. When it's on a default system and human beings are not evolving on their own, then the default system makes it automatic. So this is why we'll hear people say that we're in the age of this or that. You know, 104,000-year cycle, these great cycles, these cycles that are broken up into, according to the precession, into, 3,500-year cycles, 12,500-year cycles, give or take, 26,000-year cycles, 104,000-year cycles. This is the purpose of these cycles. These cycles are like a default system. And so because human beings have to go through different levels of evolution, the system, something has to keep evolving the human being at different times. Now, does that mean that the individual can't evolve on their own? Doesn't mean that, but that does not happen because we get lost in this collective program, a collective program and a prescribed reality. So what we live is a prescription for what reality should look like. We're living by a prescribed version of reality. What do I mean by that? It means that there are concepts by which reality operates, and in that concept becomes our belief system. So our belief system is tied into a particular birth to death program. And so you come in as a fully charged, what appears to be a fully charged battery, and somehow that battery wanes. And when that battery wanes, what happens? It expires. The battery expires. So human beings expire simply because the sensory system is not unlocked, and the information needed in DNA and throughout the whole system, the brain, it's not unlocked. And so, because of that, you're not taking in anything that is deeply new to make this happen. And so, you get off. You get kicked off. In whatever way that is, you've set up for yourself, you get kicked off. You get kicked out of the ride. And so there's the idea then of reincarnation, where people keep looping back. So for me, starting to recognize the significance of this sensory system that we call the body and how it networks into the simulation, because something has to network you into this. This is how we're making computers. This is how technology is. Technology is just replicating the bigger system, this cosmic existence, this cosmic system. And that's all. And so I think, to me, those things are extremely important to realize. It's not so much of trying to figure out, do they exist? Do UFOs exist? Do our brothers exist? That's not that. If there's any studying and they're studying you or studying us, it's really the system. They want to know how it's hooked up. How are we networked into this greater networking system? So redefining the idea of technology then becomes extremely significant. And I hope, at least at this point, that makes sense to you in seeing that we're dealing with something far greater when we talk about technology. Now, the brain, of course, is another interface, and of course, it filters reality. It filters all of these layered levels of reality and realms according to what? According to what we can accept as a possibility, as an individual and as a collective. And as a collective, we seem to be tied into, again, a particular version and interpretation of reality. And so the filtering system of the brain filters. Sometimes, yes, people see different things, a few different things, but the brain basically says, this is what you can accept as a possibility, yet everything is there. Everything is right before us. All the different realms are right there. Now I'm jumping ahead. But all the different realms are right there, because what does this all boil down to? Coordinates, points in time. Coordinates, actual coordinates that we don't really think about, meaning the space that we occupy. The space that we occupy shades over, immeasurable shades over, or other versions of reality that we do not see. And so we end up in this fascination and in this sort of loop of putting everything in this woo-woo space when it doesn't really require that. We do that because we are unlocked and we don't know how to really tap into the greater levels of ourself and unlock that part of us. And so when we have experiences that are, again, for people that are having abductions or any kind of those experiences, and there's fear becomes permission. It really does. Fear becomes permission because you haven't given yourself permission to be greater than the programming that we have received about our limitations and what we can be. What we have are boundaries that have been set in terms of what a human being can be. All right, so here I go. So the idea of a human being is also a program. Human being, when I say a human being, the human race in a simulation, in a holographic existence, in a virtual space, is just that. It's a program, and you, me, these bodies that we have, are linked into this and that is also all a program. No different than you program a computer. I know for some people it might be just too far-fetched, too much to think that way. But when you change your interpretation of technology, and I want to read something that I have here. I'm going to read this. Okay. Defining technology, it's the physical manifestation of that which has been imagined, skillfully designed and crafted. Therefore, all is art. It begins with the language of imagination. And technology, when you look up the word techno, is derived from the Greek word logos, which also means art. And what is art? Art is creation, it is engineering, it is architecture, it is all of the designing that we're talking about. So when we're talking about technology, we're talking about an incredibly expansive, outrageous designing and engineering of worlds, of possibilities, all of which exist based on patterns, certain frequency patterns. And so the human being, the human experience, a program itself, and then the human body designed to operate within that program. And in this particular space, we're dealing with the gaseous laws of this reality, of this interpretation of reality, where we take in oxygen, we have to breathe, and all of the other gases that are there that keeps the planet moving, and that we have to be able to operate in alignment to. And so we see this magnificent design that is occurring not just here, but in all other spaces, all other potentials. This is what is going on. Do we have specific engineers? Well, yes. You are also an engineer, an architect, an astronaut, a time traveler. You are every bit of it, which is why here we aim to make computers and robots and so on, because we are replicating something that we did before to get us here. The other thing that we do is we reduce who we are to the sum total of this vehicle. So when we get upset when someone says something like, your technology, well, who? What are we talking about? We take things personally. We feel like, oh, it's going to reduce us from who we are. Who you are cannot be reduced. You are simply puppeting this vehicle. It is the only way that we can experience the sensations, the processing of emotions and feelings here in this particular program. This is the purpose of the body. This is the purpose of the body, to process the sensations from the emotions, from the interactive system, because the simulation is an interactive system where we are having a relationship with any and everything. And what does that result in? We're happy, we're sad, we're mad, we're whatever. That's the processing of emotions and feelings. And you can only do that here in this body, in this sensory system. Now, what is the sensory system actually made up of, as you know? Subatomic particles. Subatomic particles. What's in those particles? Information. All of it is just streams of data, streams of information, but your body, yours, the subatomic particles that form the pattern that constructs each and every one of you, your body, has information specific to you. Information that is core information for the design of a human body, but at the same time, information that is specific to you. And that determines how you are networked into the system, into the simulation, and you're hooked up with the default program. Why? Because everything you believe about yourself and about reality, these subatomic particles carry that. They're constantly changing. As you know, this is not the same body. It's always changing. It's not the same. But why then does it look the same? Why do we then age? Why do we then age? We age because we are looping the same limiting information through those subatomic particles all the time. That's why it happens. There is nothing new enough to unlock the vehicle, to unlock the sensory system where the more expansive part of you comes in and really navigates. So the body does what it is designed to do, which is to survive, which is to keep the organism alive at all costs. Does that make sense to anybody in here? And this is why we find that they are starting to look, science is starting to look at truly, why do people die? You have been taught, we've all been taught, even though I came in realizing that this was a farce, we have been, I knew something was going on, but I was afraid to touch that thing back there. As long as it didn't pull my dress down, I was good. That'd be a whole different conference. But we are taught, and this is where we go with the DNA aspect, but we are taught this birth to death concept. So yeah, it's going to be automatic. It's a given. It's a given because everybody around you expires. Everybody around you expires. So what would make you think otherwise? What would make you think otherwise? What would make you even think that your body is locked, that it's on auto, and that it's a battery that's going to wane? Nobody, they don't talk about any of this. They don't talk about any of that. But now science is stopping and really examining why is this happening. So what happens is they're pushing it further now. Well, it looks like, human beings are going to start being able to live to 120. I'm going to get into this further. For some people are like, well, I don't want to live to 120. I'm going to get into that program. I don't want to live to 120. Now they're pushing that. And what does that tell you? That human beings respond according to what they are told, to suggestions. That's what we live by, is suggested concepts about reality. That's what happens. It's all suggestions. It's been suggested, and you dare not question it with other people because they're going to think you're crazy. Like, what are you talking about? But again, this idea of a seat at the table, this idea of going beyond what you think is so great about what our alien brothers and sisters do. We're going beyond that. We have to leave this state of kindergarten thinking in order to move beyond that into a more elevated level of technology, starting with this, because this is the interest right here. That's why the probing and all of that. This is the interest, because you don't know that there's information in there. You don't know the hookup, the network, how it connects to this bigger network, and what it is capable of doing. Because you don't know that those subatomic particles can either break down in seconds, in milliseconds, in no time, and be transported as it really, really does do, but you're unconscious of when you do it. So now the conscious aspect of it, right? We don't know that. You don't know that. So you just dabble in other things. And so you see where this is significant. Now, in terms of the information that gets passed along in the DNA, this is what happens. The reality code gets passed along from your family, from ancestors, from generation to generation. It just keeps getting passed on. A copy, a version, a coding of what reality looks like. Okay, we know a tree's a tree. We know, what that looks like. We know what a chair looks like. In other words, there's a blueprint. Also, the brain holds that blueprint. But there's a blueprint of what has been the common version and interpretation of reality. This is what is going on. There is a blueprint of the common version and interpretation of reality. And that's what keeps getting passed on through the gene pool. But then there you have what they call junk DNA. It's all the stuff that is unlocked, all the stuff that is there operating, but it's operating in multidimensional levels. As I said before, all we have are spaces between the spaces between the spaces, realms on top of realms on top of realms. So yes, DNA is operating in a multidimensional way, far beyond anything conceivable. But we, on a conscious level, are operating based on the base program or base version, base interpretation of what reality is supposed to look like. And so we keep getting the same thing over and over. What we have is mass to mass or density to density function. This is what we call third dimension. It's all mass to mass, density to density, which is volume and weight. That's the anchor. That's what gravity works with, is that mass to mass density. Because we're not operating on a upper level of frequency or vibration to allow us to not operate so heavily in the density to density state, that mass to mass state. This is where the aging starts to happen. This is where everything starts to happen, because we're not operating from a more elevated. When I say higher frequency, I don't mean good or bad, better or worse. That's not what I'm talking about. But we're not operating from an elevated frequency or elevated vibrations that cause us to do what? That would allow us to obtain and maintain an actual charge from a space that has no beginning or end. So in other words, we end up operating on this finite source of energy supplied to the body. That's why we're fully charged battery, and that's why we wane and people expire, because we're not connected to the infinite source of energy, the actual infinite source of energy that would keep this system charged. Because this system is also a power plant. It's a power plant, and everything is plugged into this power plant. Everything is plugged into it, all our feelings, all our emotions, everything, and that's why you get drained. You say, I'm drained from work, I'm so tired, because your energy is what you provide to your employer. When you do anything, it is your energy that that's what they're paying for. Just like you pay for energy with the electric company, it is the power source from you. That is what you are providing and that's what you're being paid for. And so therefore you feel drained, and then you have to recharge. You have to sleep, you have to rest, you have to recharge. And you're only able to recharge for so many times. But if we are operating on a different level, of frequency or vibration, upper levels, then that charge becomes more, what should I say? I'm going to use the word more permanent. Now, again, what I also found interesting is, for those of you who are familiar with the Integratron, whether we believe the story or not, that's not the point. George Van Tassel, what I found interesting was when he said that the Venetians told him, and I had the opportunity to meet the son-in-law way back when. He's now passed, but the son-in-law that was with him when he had that experience. But I thought it interesting for him to say that the Venetians said to him that human beings don't live long enough to acquire the kind of knowledge that is needed for the level of expansion that is needed. And I'd been saying that. And then I ran into him and I found out about this, and I'm like, well, absolutely. So that was the whole idea behind the design of the Integratron. Again, take it for what it's worth, but that was the idea, is to help to expand human life. Now, again, for some people, this idea that I'm talking about with the body and living and the programs, I get it. I get it that it might be just like, I'm not really feeling that. But what I want you to do, you don't have to do anything other than to just ponder that. When you ponder it, you're going to see a whole lot of information that will show up. You know why? Because you're finally going to give yourself permission, probably where you have never gone before in your mind. And your body has been waiting for you to give permission. Your mind has been waiting for you to give permission. Your brain has been waiting for you to give permission, because ultimately, you're the permission giver. So the life you live, it is based on permission. But the choices that you're making, the choices that we all make, is always based on the information that we have, the perception and the belief system that we've been operating by. And so you have to examine that. What have I been operating by? What is the belief system? What is my perception? What is the narrowness of my perception? Because this is big. What I'm talking about with the sensory system, it is huge. And even though I haven't been to church since, 12, one thing that always sticks out to me, though, is that idea that the last victor to be conquered is death. Make no mistake, a bunch of codes, a bunch of information gets thrown at people, but nobody really looks at it. They turn it into some other woo-woo thing of going to heaven and whatever. It's just a lot of those things that get brought in to distract you from unlocking yourself. That's all. You're supposed to unlock yourself. People say the common thing, some things we're not supposed to know. Who told you that? Who came up with that? First of all, you do know everything, because you are what? Everything. You're just streams of information on a grand level beyond anything. You have all of the information in you. But when we come to any particular experiencing of a reality like we are doing here in the human experience, you can only remember certain amounts of information. If you remembered everything, then you wouldn't even be here. So you remember information according to its relevance in the reality that you're experiencing, until you decide that you want to step it up more and you want to go beyond the limited version of the game, what I call the level 1 human experience. You want to go beyond that, then you start allowing yourself to see more, to explore more. And so my biggest thing that I'm telling you is that you have all the power to be more than you have been told by, and I'm not beating up on religion at all, but by religion and by any whatever, any cults, any whatever that there is. You have the power to be more. And what has happened is it's been necessary to keep the human mind in a container, particularly when we go to when I talk about the general matrix of control. What I'm talking about, that general matrix, so I'm talking about our governmental system and our educational system, corporations. I'm talking on that level. It works, religion too. It works best. People are more easily contained. People are more easily redirected. Our minds are more easily redirected. So yes, everything screams boundaries and limitations and a prescribed interpretation of who you are and of what is possible. I always joke about it. I said the commercials, even the commercials, remind you, don't forget to die. They do. Don't forget to die. And particularly, I love the life insurance commercials because they only give you a range here. They're going to offer it to you, but only between this age and like 85. You know, but after that, but up to this age, and just to remind you, don't stay too long. And to me, when you really start to examine this, you realize 100 years is nothing in the speck of time, which is something that doesn't really technically even exist. It exists so that we can have what? These captured moments in order to experience being human or whatever it is. But technically, it doesn't. Something else I was going to say, but my mind runs around so fast. But technically, it doesn't. And I'm going to throw this little nugget in, because I wasn't going to, but I'm going to throw this little nugget in, because it just showed up. The idea of time, for me, what I found fascinating is, it's all mathematics. It's everything we live is is quantifiable. We quantify everything. All right? Everything has to have a number and a certain amount. And yes, to a degree it does. Because everything is some sort of pattern, some sort of frequency pattern, and it requires a certain frequency, a certain amount of something to establish that pattern. And I just lost my thought on that. So I was going to tell you something of, numbers. Okay. So when I looked at it, when I do workshops, and we've done money workshops because it's an amazing science. It's all this profound science. When you look and you see zero, what do you see before every number? Zero. Zero. So yes, so out of nothing comes everything. Because in this nothing that we call zero is everything, is infiniteness, which is why you can count forever and you could not run out of numbers. But at the same time, numbers don't really exist. They don't really exist. But it exists in order to quantify reality, in order to connect and have this exchange with things. They're quantified. The measurements of the chair, the weight of the wood, the material that it takes. You see why we need it for this. But then we've locked ourselves into that finality with quantifying. Well, you know what I thought to myself? if numbers don't really exist, then two things can happen. Well, a few things. Technically, I can't run out of something that doesn't exist. I can't run out of time, and I can't really run out of money. I don't. It sounds like it doesn't make sense, but you take that workshop, and I promise you, you will understand it. What we have are programs, and those programs are necessary in order to make the game work the way it does. Like the economic system, for example, just because it's always easier for people to see it that way. The economic system, for example, our money system, wherever you go. In order for money to work the way it does, right, it has to be counted. Their value systems. $5 and $10 and $100. There's a value system in place. And so we, particularly in Western world, we had to learn the timetables. And I find it fascinating about the timetables because the timetables automatically locks you into a prescription of what 2 + 2 can be, or 2 × 2, or whatever it is, 3 × 3, And so you see how we are locked in. So it makes it easier for us to then operate within the construct of the economic systems, wherever they are, and the value systems, because you know what $10 is and you know what $100 is. You know, programmed into you, 2 + 2 can only be 4. It cannot be 6, right? And that's because that's what you're told. We don't even know what 4 or 6 really is. It's just what we're told. We don't know what anything is. I know I get outrageous. But you know what I learned? In order to unlock myself, I must be outrageous. It is not safe. It is not the safe interpretations about reality that unlocks us. It's the very same outrageous imagination that creation, that which is and cannot be defined, has brought about any and everything seen and unseen. And if all that exists are potentials, then every potential is there somewhere at a point in time. And you're simply meeting these different points in time. That's all. And the only way you meet those points in times is a shift in perception. Since there is no time, you're really always just jumping to that point in time based on your belief system. Does that make sense? So now you see just a little bit of a glimpse with the idea of numbers and the fact that everybody's been sold this idea. And you figure as a small child, as being born, coming into this life, and questioning this quietly to myself, and thinking that this seems like a big airport of arrivals and departures. People coming and going, and I'm like, this is so weird. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, does anybody think that this is kind of strange? And you know what? I am so okay with thinking that. Some people have said to me, oh, I wish I had the courage to say this, like you're okay with saying it. Because I realize that why should I care what anybody else thinks? Why should you? Because that's been the program. You have to care what other people think, and you got to make sure that you fit in, and you got to go with Borg mind thinking, and you want to be with the collective, and you want to make sure that you're not, pushing boundaries or not be part of or not fit in. This is your job. This is what you're here to do, is to be outrageous, particularly when you are ready to leave the default system. The default program has worked well. And that aligns right there with also astrology. Astrology works to a point. The coordinates of your birth, all of that information is very relevant. because it's all part of the navigating system for you as a human being until you figure it out and you decide to leave the default program. You start to decide to leave the default program, there is nothing, there is no star that can regulate you. There is nothing outside of you that can control or regulate you. Everything, however, is doing what it's supposed to do while you are in a particular state of thinking and belief. Everything is beautifully orchestrated and aligned until the human being wakes up and says, wait a second. Now, for lack of a better word, I say, are you ready to beat the game? Because it is a game. It is. I've gone into even stating that even all the planets, all the life forms, which are all us anyway, all of it, how do you know it's just not all part of one simulation that is only related to the reality that you're part of? How about that kind of crazy thinking? That it's all just part of the one simulation that you're part of, and that there is existence that is far beyond what we can conceive of. Because everything that we can conceive of, I can tell you, is still under an umbrella of thinking. It's under an umbrella of an understanding. And so, yes, we get to a place where there are things, where there are no words that cannot be defined. I know that. But in order to convey these kinds of information, we have to use language, this language. But language exists in many different forms. We, as I mentioned, as a program, is a language. You're a language of information. It's how we decide to see language and understand language. So we're seeing that there is more beyond all that we have perceived about what we think reality is, and all the planets and the galaxies. And the mere fact that, yes, they are in our frame of reference kind of lets you know that we're still in some sort of construct. The other thing that I will say is, and some of this I wrote about in my first book, The Holographic Canvas, The Fusing of Mind and Matter, which really sets the stage for a lot of this, and that came out in January 2008, and I've expanded on a lot of this information as well. You see, I interrupt myself, and then I go off course, and then I'm like, okay, I was going to tell you something else, and then my mind goes into something else. But anyway, this idea of what we think we are, we really have to re-examine that, because what we play is a character. I'm fully aware. Sonia is a character. I have a character. This is a character self. Somebody says, what do you do? Who are you? You mean what does my character do? What you are cannot be trapped in this. But sometimes people get hung up with what they think they are. Well, I'm a psychic, I'm a channeler, I'm a this. You lock yourself in. In the moment, this is what you're part of. This is what you're doing. This is the role you're playing in that moment. This is the character. This is your character. And a lot of times the character that we have has been shaped since we were children, shaped by society, shaped by families. And so most often we don't even know who that is. There an authentic version of myself? And that was when I started to ask, why do I like this color? Why do I like this? to even ask those simple questions start to take you into a different space, because you're not afraid to examine what you think you know and what your belief system is and what it's formed from. And so we also have to get away from just group mind thinking. That group mind thinking, which has been pushed and pushed and pushed, it's pushed through the idea, yes, of we are one, and we are one. But we are unique. Each of us, we have to be unique so that we can, yes, still bring a unique interpretation or version of expression to this game. And that's the reason why it becomes necessary. But there's we are one, as in, yes, we are. But at the same time, there is the uniqueness of individuality. And group mind thinking many times serves to lock someone into a set way of seeing reality. That's why religion works, because you have to see it completely just that way, and you can't step outside of it. And then we recruit other people. We recruit people to be part of, because the more people that believe that, obviously, yes, the more, that holds up. But at the same time, we see the holes in it. We see the things that happen. I won't get into that with people. There are things that I see that lets me know exactly where an individual is in their understanding. It lets you know exactly where that individual is in their understanding. And I'm all about pushing the envelope and going further and deeper into unlocking myself. Again, the idea of living longer is not about trying to escape death. It's not about that. It's so not about that. It is about being, so that you can unlock more and more of what's possible, so that at some point a deeper science takes place, and the way that we will jump through time, in the way that the molecules of this body can fold up, in the way that, yes, you can teleport, in the way that we can do these things that this body can do. And science is discovering this. When I started talking about some of this stuff back in 2007 and 2008, some of the things I was talking about was definitely, people are like, what? Now they email me. They go, wow, years later, now we see that this is what's going on. So going back to group mind thinking, you don't have to wait for anybody to evolve or expand. And what I find interesting is, we'll say Buddha, Jesus, they didn't have to wait, but you do. You got to be part of the group mind. We have to ascend together. No, we don't. We have to ascend as one. No, we don't. Like the single cell of a plant, all of the history of that plant is encoded in that single cell. So how does that relate to you? It means that the entirety, all of that which is that cannot be defined, all of that information is in every one of us, because every one of us is that thing we're looking for, is that substance. Every one of us is that. Come down to this plane, this level of experiencing. And all the other levels that we exist on, because we exist on all these other levels, on multiple levels. Do you know what it takes for us to show up in this physical form? I think what's his name says, we're traveling down 512 dimensions or whatever, and I forgot how many seconds or milliseconds or to show up here. For those molecules to just be like, because it is expected that you will show up, that I will show up, and the expectation allows, like quantum physics says, that form to be. When nobody's observing, as they say, is anything there? Or is it simply when we need to engage? And so it is about moving from these comfortable states of thinking and being. If you can manage to do that, I know it's easier to be in a safe space of thinking, but to step way beyond that safety and say, I want to understand more. I want to unlock myself on a much more profound level so that I can see what I am. I tell you, when we do that, you can even look in the mirror over a week or couple weeks, and you will see it even in your face. Why? Because those subatomic particles are carrying the information of what you believe about yourself and your existence right now. It's all in there. And so that's why, no different than you go on vacation and you're rested, and because you're not thinking about all this stuff, and you've been reformed how many times, and the information in there is a bit different, and you come back and people go, oh, you look so much younger. You related to it's all the same formula. It's all the same thing. Wave and particle dance also. Wave and particle dance. We are both a wave and a particle at the same time. We are appearing and disappearing all of the time. But it's much easier to not really look so deeply at the truth of this, of what we're looking at, what I've been talking about. And it's easier to distract ourselves with other things, because I'm not lying, but it is, in a sense, it's work. It is work to change the programs, because those programs are in there so deeply for however many thousands of years, or however many years, that million years, whatever, they're in there. But on the side of no time, that's why Confucius said, enlightenment need not take a lifetime, but can come in a moment. So it's just all about where we are in our understanding and what we choose to do. How interested are you in being more? How interested are you in digging deeper into deeper aspects of yourself? And before the clock runs out, the matrix clock runs out, I just want to see if there's anything else that I kind of wanted to touch on, because I've done every talking but not look at this paper, which it always turns out that I've covered everything that I wrote down anyway. I think I pretty much covered all of that. Okay, so anyway, the idea now is about the upgrade, which is everything that I've been talking about leading to this. So when somebody says, how does this relate? How does this relate? How does this relate to talking about alien life? Well, if you walk away today from my talk and you do not see how it relates, I don't know what to tell you. But if we as human beings want a seat at the table, which means stepping it up, then you do need to go into a different space of understanding. Don't just hang out in fascination. Don't just hang out in fascination. Be more. When you are more than has been expected by some of our alien brothers and sisters, then that changes. Then the interception stops. That kind of interception where you feel like you've been taken or abducted or any of that, it begins to stop, because it's a completely different frequency that you're operating by. You have to understand a lot of the ones that are doing that is because they might be advanced in technology in comparison to where we are as human beings, but they're operating on a lesser understanding. When they are operating on a greater understanding, do you know how many do not do that? They have no interest. Why? Because they already know. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Technology may be advanced, But it doesn't mean that that essence is advanced. And yes, oh, consciousness, real quickly. I wanted to throw this out. When we talk about consciousness, consciousness is not the end all. Consciousness is also another interface. I call it a consciousness system. And we all we have a consciousness system. It is the interceptor between that which cannot be defined, that which is beyond that, and everything that comes below that. And so when we say consciousness created this and consciousness did that, it is a consciousness system. All we have are a lot of systems that we're dealing with. And it determines a lot of what happens from this point on. It's kind of like the apex and then going further up, like the electromagnetic spectrum, where we come to the apex, where it widens from the Hertz field or radio field, and the wavelengths get shorter as the frequency increases, goes to the apex, 0-point field. And we tend to stop there, but it's what branches off after that, beyond the 0-point field. And so we have to realize those boundaries that we've created for ourselves, and it's a lot of comfortable understanding. A lot of comfortable understanding is what people are operating by. So I think I have, I've got 2 minutes left. Woo-hoo, let me do the whole lecture all over in 2 minutes. So I do hope that I have left those of you who really feel this information left you with something. Perhaps it's things that you'd been thinking about somewhere in here. I get that a lot. But then they just needed to hear that particular thing to feel like it's okay to go there in their thinking. It's all okay for you to do. Let me tell you something. There can be mind control, as they talked about. There can be all of that stuff. But there's a part of you that nobody can unlock. No one can unlock it. It's like a fail-safe system. Only you can unlock it, because we operate in several different levels of mind. And so there's a part of us that only us, we're the only ones that can unlock it. And we need to keep that in mind so that you don't feel so disempowered or feel as if you've given your power away to something or someone else. But you are the only one that can truly unlock yourself. And I believe that's it. I thank you so much.